Once we educate the general public, not only in this nation but worldwide, to the true facts that these men are in fact not being treated the way Hanoi would like to paint the picture, then I believe public pressure will be brought to bear upon Hanoi, and they will be shown up for the dishonesty and distruth that they are putting forth. We tell the world, we have not heard, we do not know. Please just let us know if our husbands or sons are alive. This is so little to ask.
I've gone to see Senator McGovern since he has been to Paris and has talked with the North Vietnamese. I have written to Secretary General U Thant at the UN, and I have written to Xuan Thuy several times, have not received a reply.
In one of my most recent letters to Senator Fulbright, I said, last summer I wrote to you asking for an appointment with you and expressing the idea that the most vociferous critics of the war had very probably lengthened the war and thus had a detrimental effect on the possibility of release for the prisoners. At that time, you refused to see me on the grounds that my idea was so preposterous, and that was his phrase, that visiting with me would serve no purpose.
We're going back today to Paris in hopes of finding the information that we originally went there seeking. On September 17th, the North Vietnamese promised to send us letters regarding our husbands' status and well-being. We have not to date received those letters. We still want to know about our husbands. We want to know what we can tell our children concerning their fathers.
Well, yes. At the beginning, the real rough treatment came at first when they were trying to get military answers from you, and then after that, they tried to force you into appearing before these delegations to say that you had received humane treatment, and they would throw rocks at you and hit you, and one of the little ones came up and hit me in the side of the mouth, and it dislodged a filling. But and then once I got to the camp, they refused to give me medical treatment, saying that I was going to die in 4 hours if I didn't give them information. I just finally passed out. The North Vietnamese tried to get Lieutenant Commander Stratton to appear before a press delegation and say that he had received humane and lenient treatment. He refused because his treatment hadn't been humane. He had been tied up to ropes, with ropes to such a degree that he still has large scars on his arms from the rope burns which became infected. He was deprived of sleep, beaten, had his fingernails removed, and put in solitary, but the North Vietnamese insisted that he make the false humane treatment statements and threw him into a dark cell alone to think about it for 38 days. I feel a strong obligation to the men back there, and they know that I'm going to come back here and tell the truth, and that's what they wanted.
great free debate, perhaps the greatest of all time, surfaced in the United States, and the country gave birth to 100 voices in universities, in town halls, on television, and in Washington.
I'm opposed to this war not only because I think it is morally and legally wrong, but because I think it is destroying the good name and the leadership of the United States. Furthermore, I believe that the war is militarily unwinnable. If we should succeed in bombing Vietnam to rubble, we will only find ourselves up against the Chinese.
Look, what I could do with is more compassion and more sympathy with those tens of thousands of civilians in South Vietnam who have been killed and kidnapped by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces as a matter of deliberate policy. And the far larger tens of thousands of South Vietnamese military who've been killed and wounded simply because North Vietnam is trying to seize South Vietnam by force.
I lost a really dear friend over there, and all of a sudden it brought it home to me. And I began wondering, what are we doing over there? Is this what honor is all about? Is it worth it? And I don't think it is.
All of us tend to place a greater value on our own people. But can you really draw a line as to whether it's worth one American life if that, by saving that American life, you subject probably thousands of Vietnamese to death? Human life is human life.
We believe that this war is illegal from every point of view, completely immoral, and I would like to add for myself that it's detrimental to the best interests of the United States.
How do you feel about all the charges that America's immoral and wrong in this war?
I feel they're false because I fought over myself, and I've seen it. Most of the people making these statements haven't been overseas in Vietnam. And if they could go over there and see what's going on, I think they'd think it was just war.
And we just cannot now dishonor our word or abandon our commitment or leave those who believed us and who trusted us to the terror and repression and murder that would follow.
I don't think there's any evidence or any real reason to believe that that kind of mass execution would take place.
The very fact that practically 2 million of the North Vietnamese fled to South Vietnam to escape the communist regime is an indication of that this government did not represent the will of the people.
Not only are we bleeding our men, having them die in Vietnam, we are spending at the rate of about $30 billion a year, $2.5 billion a month in Vietnam. Now that's more than we spend on our entire housing program. It's more than we spend on our entire poverty program in a year. And this money must be diverted back to our domestic needs, and we must end this futile war, immoral war.
The Vietnamese have resisted the invasion of any and all outsiders, the French, the Japanese, and now the Americans. And let me say, as one whose opposition to our policy in Southeast Asia long preceded the rising tide of revolt against it, that there can be no peace by negotiation.
The NLF is part, of course, of South Vietnam, a part that is like an alien body, fed, supplied, supported, and kept up in some state of vigor by a hostile force outside the country, namely in North Vietnam. I wonder how we in this country, or somebody in any other Western European country, would feel if such a force existed within their ranks and somebody from the outside would tell us now, be a good boy and let those people determine your fate.
It started out as a colonial war, it became a civil war, and we intervened on one side
a thing which this country has never done before, and I hope never does again.
Do you feel that what you've gone through and what you're going to have to go through the rest of your life was worthwhile?
Yes, I do. Because I think just about all people should think of just one thing right now, and that's freedom. And the only way we're going to get freedom is to protect ourselves, whether it's in this country or in other countries that need our help. And I think a lot of people feel the same way as I do.
Well, I've said that we ought to publicly indicate our willingness to accept a new government in South Vietnam, which would be a coalition government or a fusion government. I don't really care what they call it. You'd have to anticipate that it would include elements of the National Liberation Front, because this is really what the war has been fought about.
The purpose of communists is to have a coalition government, and from that to dominate the South Vietnam under the communist regime. And our people in South Vietnam don't like it to have a communist.
Well, to those who are flirting with communism, I can only say, have you ever lived under a totalitarian government? Well, I have lived under two types, National Socialistic as well as communism. And I know what I'm talking about. Why don't you ask a Hungarian or a Czech or a Pole or anybody else how they like it before you really ignore the facts of life and support something that you wouldn't want for yourself or for your children?
If we cease bombing, we are, in a sense, not knuckling under, but calling the bluff of other governments who have said that this is the key, and confront them with the responsibility of following through with the imperative logic of their pronouncements in this respect.
Well,
it's a risk for peace.
That might be one element, but I don't hear very many people talk about stopping the invasion of South Vietnam by the North Vietnamese. It seems to me that the two go hand in hand.
There had been 4 or 5 bombing halts. The Soviets had asked us once to halt the bombing for 2 weeks. The suggestion being, the thought being, that they thought negotiations could begin within that period. And the bombing halt lasted for 37 days and was resumed when nothing had started.
I have now ordered that all air, naval, and artillery bombardment of North Vietnam cease as of 8 a.m. Washington time, Friday morning.
This is the kind of peripheral struggle that I think should be compromised. And I don't mean by that we run out and run it. I don't advocate we just say forget it at all. But it isn't of the kind of importance that surely would cause great nations to go to an all-out war.
If you're going to fight a war, I believe in winning it, because you're losing lives. And this is one thing ought to be number one priority. And whenever you get into war, my own idea is get everything you can, fast as you can, use everything you can, and get it over with. And I preach this, I'm not saying anything new.
Until the president stands up and says, we're bringing all of the troops home as quickly as we can bring them home, we're bringing them home now, I think the anti-war sentiment in the country will continue to grow. We have to bring them home, and we have to bring them home immediately.
That ending the conflict is not so simple as just calling it off and coming home, because the price for that kind of peace could be 1,000 years of darkness for generations yet unborn.
You don't think there should be a demonstration
No.
against the war? Do you think it does any good? It might hurry up the withdrawal?
No, I don't think it will hurry up anything. It might delay it.
Oh, do you have any children?
Yes, I have 3 boys.
Any of them old enough to take part?
One will be 18 next month.
Last spring, Jerry Grossman, a Boston businessman, who was the president of Massachusetts Peace Action Council, suggested that it might be possible to begin to put together an effort across the country to take time away from regular activities and instead devote those days to working against the war.
A lot of Americans are against war, but a lot of them that are against it don't really know everything about it, and they half know about it, and they don't really try to understand. They don't know the Vietnamese people, and they don't know the situation between the South and the North.